Well, I've known about punkwood for a long time because I use it in the smoker for the bees. So this is dried out, so it's a lot more stable when it's dried out. And you can break it off like polystyrene. And when you light one end of it, as long as it's got some oxygen, it'll carry on burning all the way to the other end, nice and slowly, and giving off plenty of smoke. So once that catches, it'll just keep going. We don't use it on the bees unless it's necessary. Usually we're not using it because they're aggressive or anything. We just use it when we've taken the hive apart and they're all around the edges. If you smoke around the edges, that'll drive them back in, so you're not squashing them. So it's just a light form of control, but it simulates a forest fire as far as they're concerned. And they also think then, because there is a forest fire, they might have to evacuate the hive, so they'll gorge themselves on honey, and that will make them more docile as well. But it's a big disruption to the hive if you start using it willy-nilly, so we don't use it. You need it there, and you do need to use it when you're putting the hive back together, just to stop you from killing so many of them. But we'll just leave that there like that, and that'll keep going. And then to put it out, what we do is we get some to starve off the oxygen. It's usually sufficient just to put a piece of grass in there. There's another little hole in there, but if the air can't flow through, then that's usually sufficient to put it out. Well, that's how good it is for us. That's how I first found out about it, and have been using it for the last 10 or 15 years. So now, if they were all swarming around there, we'd need the smoker just to drive them down, so we didn't squash them. On a warm day like today, the wax is very soft, so it's easy to get off, but you shouldn't really go in them on a cold day. But on a cold day, the wax it's like concrete. And we heap a pile of bricks on top, not just to stop it from falling over in strong winds, but also just to make sure it all stays tightly together, so the water can't get through the can't do any gaps, because it's wood after all, so it's going to move a bit. Anyway, this is about punkwood, not beekeeping. We might go into beekeeping a bit later on. Hopefully it's not too noisy. I'm right next to a main road here. But this has been my source of punkwood for quite a number of years now, mainly for the beekeeping. But as you can see, when I get it, it's wet. It's like a sponge. I can just literally stick my finger through it. And it's quite fragile. When it's soaking wet, it'll just fall to pieces. It's a bit better when it's dry, so I've got to be fairly careful. Here's a piece that's been on the ground for a long time. It's just rotting away. So I'm not going to cut it from the middle here, so it'll disturb the whole log. I'm just going to take a piece from the far end down there. This isn't all punkwood, but mostly it is. The part of it is fairly solid, but most of it is just wet and spongy. What you really want is a white wood if you can, a lighter wood, not the dark wood, certainly for the bees anyway. Yeah. Having a bit of difficulty with this because not all of it is punkwood. There's a section on the around this side here that's still quite good solid wood. That'll do. So that section there's solid wood, but all the rest of it is punkwood. I'll take it home and dry it out. Takes a long time to dry out. Might last me a couple more years, but there's plenty of it about. That's what all the noise is about. We're very close to the main road. This is the punk wood after it's been dried out, and it's exactly the same as I put in the smoker earlier for the bees. So you can just break it apart. It's a little bit like polystyrene. It's still quite fragile, but not as fragile as when it's wet. So what you can do is put it in your charring tin, and char it exactly the same as you would with your cotton material. So it's in a sealed tin with a little hole in the top, and I'm just going to put it on the fire. And then as that heats up, smoke will come out the little vent hole. It may catch fire, and that's any water vapour or steam coming out, and then it'll also then be the more volatile elements of the wood. So it basically leaves charcoal behind. It's going to catch fire in a minute. Wood gas coming out. It's what they used to run petrol vehicles on in the Second World War, when there was petrol rationing in the UK. Some buses and some farm agricultural vehicles converted to wood gas. When it stops venting off, then it should be done, and you don't want to let any oxygen get in it, or the charcoal itself will start burning. Once you've got that alight, it'll just keep smouldering, so it's a good way to take an ember from one fire to another. And that's why we use it on the smokers, because for the bees, because in the smoker there it'll just keep burning, and it'll be there when you need it. So the only two ways I know of putting it out is to totally exclude the oxygen, or to dip it in a bit of water. because it will just keep going. Right, I can't take the lid off with one hand. That's what you get for your money. Some very friable material, very fragile, very light. And what do we do with it? Old file, piece of flint, no, nearly. Where that's turning white, that's all the light. You see that? All that white is where it's already burned. So it takes a spark tremendously easily. It would easily take a spark from your ferrocerium rod. Well, I haven't got a lot of ferrocerium rod left. There we go. That's a light. 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 In fact, the whole lot's a light. Put the lid on. So that's how good the stuff is. That's if you can only generate sparks, that's going to take a spark. as good if not better than charcloth. So that's punkwood.